Chapter 2. Sometimes you have to step out. Sometimes the answer to our overcoming and breaking through to a victory takes more than prayer. Sometimes we have to be willing to partner with our Father and step out in ways that look crazy. This is what happened in one of the most amazing answers to prayer that I've experienced in my life. But I have to give you a little background on this particular situation. Over the course of my short life, I've given away a lot of stuff to people who needed it. I gave away my first car when I was 20 years old. I had received an inheritance from my dad who died when I was 10 years old, and I had just received the money that year in college. My music professor, David, was driving to the university one cold Minnesota day, and his wheel fell off his old Honda Accord, leaving him stranded in a not-so-good part of town. This is just a few weeks after he had major engine trouble for the second time, with costly repairs. He had 3 kids at the time, and I felt such compassion for his situation that I decided to give him $5,000 of my inheritance. Needless to say, my mom was pretty upset about my decision. As a parent, I don't blame her now for being upset. When I gave that money to my professor, he said to me, "I don't want to take this money from you, but God won't let me refuse it." With the money, he was able to buy another used low-mileage Honda Accord, which he used until I graduated. Over the next 18 years, I gave away another 4 or 5 cars. On one occasion, I gave away a minivan to a guy who needed transportation to start a new business. I also gave him a lawnmower, a weed whacker, and a blower so he could start his landscaping business and get it off the ground. This is all just background and a preface that God never forgets your generosity to others. Giving away our minivan caused our family to be in need, and just like those families and individuals that needed a miracle, we needed a miracle as well. I was convinced that God didn't want me in debt, so although I could afford to make another car payment, I didn't want to do that. I began to pray once again for God to do a miracle. Each day, I drove by the Honda dealer in our only car and looked at the Honda Odyssey minivans. To me, the new Honda Odyssey was just the most amazing vehicle ever for a family and a business, and that black one was even cool for a guy to have. One day, as I was praying for a vehicle, I sensed that God asked me a very direct question: "What kind of car do you want?" My response to the question was answered in my usual honest way. I answered, "Well, since you're asking, I'd like to have a black Honda Odyssey with leather, navigation, an entertainment system with a DVD player." Then I felt the Lord say to me, "Well, then ask me for it." And so, emboldened by the fact that God asked me what I wanted, I began to pray for that. For a period of about 3 weeks, I would go to the dealer after hours at night and pray over the Honda Odyssey with those features. I would circle it, declaring that it was mine in Jesus' name. One night as I drove into the parking lot of the dealer, I was sad to discover that it had been sold. There were no other black Odyssey vans on the lot with leather, so I waited until they received the new shipment, and when it finally came on the lot, I started circling it and declaring that that one was mine and nobody else could have it. I brought the family out there, we all put our hands on the van and prayed that God would provide the van for us. On a Friday morning, as I was getting ready for the day, the most ridiculous thought crossed my mind, a thought so crazy I just knew it was God speaking to me. I heard the concept like a voice telling me the whole idea. Go to the Honda dealer, find the general manager, and say this: "I would like to produce your commercials for your dealership, but I don't want you to pay me. Instead, I want to trade my services for a vehicle." You see, I had been producing videos for a few companies, nothing huge, so this opportunity would be a big step up for my business. So with crazy faith that God had really instructed me to do this, I drove to the dealership, walked in, and asked to speak to the general manager. As it turns out, the general manager knew who I was and invited me to sit down in his office. I sat there with this nervousness like when you're about to ask someone to marry you. I was trying to keep from shaking as I spoke, so I said to him the exact thing I was instructed to say, and after showing him a little bit of my video production portfolio, I asked him if I could produce their commercials, but instead of receiving payment with money, I wanted that black Honda Odyssey sitting right outside. Mike, the general manager, paused, looked up and said, "I think we can work something out. You see, we just had a meeting and we're discussing who was going to be our spokesperson for the coming year as we build the new facility. It looks like this is perfect timing." So that day, I walked out of the dealership with a contract to produce their commercials monthly and a brand new black Honda Odyssey with leather, navigation, and all the bells and whistles. It was the perfect vehicle to represent my business and carry my growing family. I can't tell you the feeling that day when the impossible happened and I drove off the lot in that $42,000 van. What God was showing me during those formative times of prayer was to believe Him for impossible things. Don't limit God in what He's desiring to provide for those who are faithful to Him. In addition, I needed to see that sometimes the answer to a need would require obedience on my part in order to see the results. God won't make a car appear in my driveway, but He will provide miraculous connections if I'm willing to step out. Once again, the Bible talks about co-laboring with God in 1 Corinthians 3:9. He gave us hands and feet and a brain so we could use them for His benefit, and also to provide for ourselves and families. So, the difficulty you're facing may require you to listen to that instruction from God telling you to do something a little outside the box. But you won't hear that small voice until you begin to pray so much that His voice speaking to you becomes a daily occurrence.